So we'll go ahead and continue on talking about anatomy. This one will be the digestive system. So the function of the digestive system is digestion, which is basically the process that takes food from its original form as you eat it and then makes it something that the body can actually use. This is also called your gastrointestinal system or your GI system. Your abdomen itself is the second major body cavity. This contains all of your major organs for digestion and excretion. Excretion is how you get waste out of your body. We've already talked about the quadrants. Definitely need to know what those are and what is contained in them, at least for the most part. Make sure when you're referring to left or right in regard to the quadrants that you're using the patient's left or right, not your left or right. And also keep in mind that several organs lie in more than one quadrant. So you kind of can see a representation here. Definitely doesn't have every single organ on there, but it gives you a pretty good idea. Your digestive system runs from your mouth all the way to your anus. That's a structure called the alimentary canal. Starts with an A, not an E. Your mouth is your lips, cheeks, gums, teeth, tongue, basically everything contained within that structure. And then you have salivary glands that produce saliva. Fun fact, they actually produce 1.5 liters of saliva a day. Saliva acts as an early substance that breaks down or begins breaking down substances in your food. Also acts to kind of bind your food together after you chew it up. I know it makes no sense to chew it up and then to put it back together, but it kind of forms this glob of food that makes it easier to swallow. And then it also serves as a lubricant to help that food move easily from your mouth through your esophagus and then finally down to your stomach. Your oropharynx is that tubular structure at the back of your mouth. It runs from the back of the mouth to the top of the esophagus and the trachea. Food obviously meant to go posteriorly into the esophagus rather than into the trachea because that's how you choke. The esophagus itself is a collapsible tube. It's about 10 inches long. It extends from the end of the pharynx all the way down to the stomach. You do have muscles in it that help propel the food all the way down to make sure that it gets into the stomach. Your stomach is a hollow organ, mostly in the left upper quadrant. It receives food from the mouth via the esophagus. It helps break that food down into a semi-liquid form and then helps facilitate the movement into the intestines. You then have your pancreas, which is a flat, solid organ that lies below and behind the liver and the stomach. It contains two major kinds of glands. You have exocrine glands and endocrine. Exo meaning outside of, endocrine meaning inside of. Your exocrine glands are going to secrete pancreatic juices that contain enzymes that help digest fat, starch, and protein. And this is typically going to go into your digestive tract, even though it's called exo because we're referring to the blood vessels. Endocrine goes into the blood vessel. The major gland type of this endocrine category is going to be your islet of Langerhans, which produce insulin that helps control your blood sugar, and we will talk about that later. Your liver is a very large solid organ that is immediately beneath the diaphragm. The majority of it is in the right upper quadrant, but it does extend over to that left upper quadrant as well. It's a solid organ. It's actually the largest solid organ in the abdomen. It is made up by a large mass of blood vessels and cells. The liver has several different functions. It filters harmful substances. That's why people that drink excessively tend to have liver problems, because that's where that is filtered out. It forms factors that are needed for blood clotting and normal plasma production. Remember, plasma is that liquid portion of your blood, so your liver aids in that. It's also the principal organ for storing sugar or starch for the immediate use by the body as energy. You have some bile ducts that run into your digestive system. The bile is created by the liver and then goes to the gallbladder, which serves as a reservoir for that bile. The main function of bile is the digestion of fat. So whenever you've heard somebody saying that they have a gallbladder attack or gallstones or whatever, they typically are going to get their pain after eating a really fatty meal, because that's when the gallbladder starts dumping that bile into the intestines. And if it's angry in any sort of way, that fat is going to be what's going to make it even more angry, because it's going to try and break that down. Your small intestine is a major hollow organ of the abdomen. This produces enzymes and mucus to aid in digestion. This is where most of your food absorption occurs. There's 3 sections that are contained in your small intestine. You have your duodenum, your jejunum, and your ileum. You then have the large intestine, which is a major hollow organ, much, much shorter than the small intestine. This consists of the cecum, the colon, and then the rectum. The major function of the colon is to absorb like 5 to 10% of digested foods. Like I said, the majority of that happens in the small intestine. Large intestine does a little bit. And then also removes water from the intestine to form solid stool or poop. The rectum is the lowermost end of the colon. That's where you store the feces until you actually decide to go to the bathroom. Your appendix is a little teeny tube. It's about 3 or 4 inches long that opens into the cecum, which is that first portion of the intestine. It's in the right lower quadrant of the abdomen. If that becomes obstructed, inflamed, or infected, you have a condition that's called appendicitis. Appendicitis is actually a really, really common cause for severe abdominal distress. So that is why we bring it up in this A&P portion. The rectum, like we said a little earlier, is the lowermost end of the colon. It holds feces until it's actually expelled from the body. The terminal end of the rectum is the anus. Both the rectum and anus have sphincters. Sphincters are complex circular muscles that contract to close off a tubular structure, or they relax to open. But this allows the escape of liquids, gases, and solids from the digestive tract. The physiology of the digestive system. Enzymes are added to food by salivary glands. That's kind of the first area that it starts. By the stomach, the liver, the pancreas, and the small intestine. What enzymes do is they break food down into their basic elements. So basic sugars, fatty acids, amino acids, which then can be further processed by the liver and then circulated in the blood throughout the body. So they actually get absorbed into the blood via the mostly small intestine. That large intestine does a little bit. And then it's transmitted throughout the blood into the liver and then can actually be used by the body. The endocrine system is kind of the message and control system of the body itself. It ends up being a huge factor in a lot of our bodily functions. Endocrine endocrine glands, remember we talked about a little bit with the pancreas, endocrine goes directly into the bloodstream. So epi, norepi that come from those adrenal glands that we were talking about that sit on top of the kidney and perpetuate the fight or flight reaction. Insulin goes directly into the bloodstream. Each endocrine gland ends up producing one or more hormones. And each of those hormones has a specific effect on either some organ, some tissue, or some process within the body. So you can see a representation of the different parts of the endocrine system, all those different glands. The adrenal glands, which sit there on top of your kidneys, regulate stress response, the fight or flight response. The ovary regulates sexual function and characteristics and reproduction in women. The pancreas regulates glucose metabolism and other functions. Your parathyroid, which is up there in your neck, you can see that represented in the woman's picture. Both of us have them, but it regulates serum calcium, or the amount of calcium within the blood. You have your thyroid gland, which your parathyroids are attached to, which regulates metabolism. You have your pituitary gland, which is up in the brain. This regulates all of the other endocrine glands. This is called the master gland. And then you have the testes, which regulate sexual function, characteristics, and reproduction in men. Your brain controls the release of your hormones, which pretty much comes from the pituitary overall. The result of your endocrine gland is a very intricate, controlled system of communicating. If you have excesses or deficiencies in hormones, that can lead to disease processes such as diabetes. Diabetes is a inadequacy or the inability of your bodies to produce enough insulin. So either you produce enough insulin and it can't get into your cells, or you just don't produce enough to begin with. The urinary system. Urinary system controls the discharge of waste materials that are filtered out of the blood by the kidneys. This controls the fluid balance in the body. That's why if you drink more, you pee more, trying to keep that balance. Filters and eliminates wastes, and then helps control the pH balance. So to keep your blood pH at that 7.35 to 7.45, urinary system plays a big role in that. In your urinary system, you have the kidneys. You have two of them, and they're solid organs. You have ureters, which carry urine from the kidney down into the bladder, which actually stores your urine, and then you have your urethra, which urine exits the bladder and is excreted from the body itself. Your kidneys actually lie in the retroperitoneal space. So in the back, kind of, if you feel both of your hips bones kind of in the back and go up above those, that's about where your kidneys lie. Your kidneys end up getting rid of toxic waste from your body and also control the balance of water and the amount of salt that you have in your body. You have some massive blood vessels that attach to your kidneys. You have your aorta and your inferior vena cava, which attach into your kidneys. Since it ends up filtering so much blood, it has to have a good source of blood. Your bladder is located immediately behind that pubic symphysis in the pelvic cavity, so that bone that's right there in the front of your pelvis. That's where the bladder is located. We will go into the next system on the next video.